Hello and thank you for joining us for the April property market update. As usual, I'm here with my colleague Robert.
Hello.
And we're going to discuss with you some shocking statistics about the fall-through rates.
Yes.
And but first, as usual, we're going to start with a national picture, zone it down to Oxford, and then we'll talk a little bit about lettings figures. I've got some interesting stats about home ownership. And then
we'll jump into to the price changes and what's happened to the UK asking prices and property prices. So average in the UK, asking prices month by month have gone up 1.4% in April.
To a national average of 377,000.
And that represents about a 1.3% increase compared to the previous year.
Okay.
So we're 1.3% up as a UK average. When you narrow that down to Oxford and Oxfordshire, those numbers are slightly different. So month on month, it's 2.2%, but as a yearly figure, it's only up by 1%. So it hasn't. I think last year may have hit Oxford a little bit harder than the rest of the UK, but this year we're seeing good recovery.
Yeah, absolutely.
So far.
But it's interesting because we're seeing steady price growth, house price growth. But what's interesting is it lags behind inflation.
Yeah.
So actually affordability, buying power is increasing for buyers. And actually I've got a stat here. So they're relaxing a lot of the borrowing criteria, and which is what lenders do. They tightened up after the global financial crisis. They're starting to ease that over time. All of the criteria is relaxing, and the average person can now borrow £38,000 more than they could this time last year. With that income, that's about a 13% increase in an average borrower's borrowing capacity, and that's why we're seeing such a return to first-time buyers coming back to the market and a real drive in that marketplace. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, what's the next thing, Robert?
Renters' Rights Bill. What are we seeing with that?
Well, Renters' Rights Bill, as expected, the government have realised just how enormous this task is. There was talk of a spring-summer launch. They have officially, during April, kicked the can down the road. They've said it will be at least October this year, and in honesty, everybody in the industry expects it more likely to be in 2026 that it'll actually come into place. There's just an enormous amount of moving parts there. If you want more information on the Renters' Rights Bill, then Richard, who heads up the lettings department, he's going to be doing a video dedicated to that subject. So just follow all of us on our social media channels, because we'll be obviously promoting that, and then you'll be able to watch it. I think he's going to do it as a webinar, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So that would be good.
And just from you, before I get into my shocking stats, you're doing some research about affordability of buying.
Yeah.
And sort of comparing it to rents and that sort of
buying versus renting is fascinating, because we've taken a low deposit mortgage and the average house price and the average rental price. For the very first time in April, in a long time, it has happened before, but the first time in a long time, it's actually now cheaper to buy a property in terms of monthly repayments and this is to buy the average property than it is to rent the average house. And so the average property is £1,356 a month to rent. Now, somebody buying at that the average house with a deposit of 10% will be paying £1,328. So it's £29 a month cheaper to own the house than it is to rent it, which I thought was really interesting stats. But then I explained to Robert that clearly, if you're in a shower in a rented property and it breaks, then you phone up the agent, and within a couple of days you've got a new shower. Whereas,
but on the flip side, if you own that property and you're paying that mortgage, if those are repayment mortgages, you're creating wealth.
Yeah.
On a month by month basis.
That's very true. That is very true. So that's my interesting stat. Yeah. And Robert, why did we cry earlier this month?
So it was shocking, really, the stat that came out. But in short, 1 in 3 house transactions and house sales fall through. 1 in 3.
But that was in quarter one.
That was in quarter 1 of 2025. But that was still shocking. That's higher than it's ever been, really, in terms of fall through rate. That's very, very high. And the majority of the reasons why houses are falling through and sales are falling through is the difficulty that buyers are finding of securing a mortgage.
No, it's actually that they failed to get a mortgage, and
Yes.
if we're
if we're being really brutal, it's failure
they
to get a mortgage, and principally because due diligence hasn't been done on those people.
Yeah.
And I put absolutely zero blame on buyers. Buyers will work with the information that they're provided, but the biggest problem is going to be the due diligence of potentially mortgage brokers. But I'm putting a lot of this blame on agents.
Yeah, they need to qualify a buyer's ability to go ahead.
Yeah.
We have a 1 in 6 fall through rates, which is still too high, quite frankly. But none of them fall through, or very few fall through, because a buyer can't raise a mortgage because we've done our due diligence properly to make sure they're able to go ahead.
Yeah.
So if you're currently on the market or considering going on the market, just make sure your agent's got a robust buyer qualification process, just so we don't waste tens of thousands of pounds in the process. So hopefully the stats nationally are going to improve over time, but we should see what happens. We'll continue to monitor it. I think that's it.
That's everything. Yes, thank you so much for watching. As always, we'll be putting another one of these out in May, so do look out for us for there, and we'll speak to you all soon.
Yep, many thanks, all the best.
Take care.
Bye bye.